My brother stole my business idea and made millions. I waited years and took it all back with interest. I was 24 when the idea first came to me. On one of those quiet, rainy Thursday nights in early autumn that make you feel like the whole city is holding its breath. I was alone in my cramped one-room apartment on the fourth floor of an old Plattenbau building. In Leipzig Plagwitz, the radiator was making its usual metallic ticking sounds, the kind that drive you slowly insane if you pay too much attention. I had just finished another 12-hour day at the digital marketing agency, where I worked as a junior copywriter, writing ad copy for car insurance, teeth whitening strips, and suspiciously cheap online furniture that always arrived with missing screws. I was exhausted, slightly drunk on the cheapest red wine from Rie, and scrolling through Instagram on my cracked iPhone 8. That's when I saw yet another perfectly curated subscription box unboxing video. Velvet ribbons, aesthetic lighting, a girl with perfect nails opening layers of tissue paper to reveal overpriced socks, artisanal soap, and a tiny scented candle that probably cost €3 to make but sold for 42. Everything looked beautiful. Everything felt completely empty. And in that exact moment something clicked inside me. What if the box wasn't just another pretty delivery? What if every single item carried the real, unfiltered story of the person who made it? Not corporate marketing fluff, the actual human being. The coffee farmer who wakes up at 4 in the morning to pick cherries by hand on a steep slope. In the mountains of southern Colombia, the tea picker, a single mother of 3, who carefully selects only the top leaves at sunrise in the misty hills of Kerala. The old potter in a tiny Portuguese village who still fires his kiln with eucalyptus wood, the way his grandfather taught him 60 years ago. I wanted people to feel something when they opened the box. Not just, oh, nice product, but connection, gratitude, maybe even a tiny sense of responsibility toward the people at the very beginning of the chain. I grabbed the nearest notebook, an old Moleskine I had bought on sale 2 years earlier, and never used, and started writing down everything that was pouring out of my head. Name ideas, packaging sketches, possible suppliers, rough pricing calculations on the back of a receipt. By 3 in the morning, I had the name, Roots and Roast. It felt right, simple, honest. The next 2 years were a blur of nights, weekends, and every free minute I could steal from my day job. I started small, very small. First I ordered tiny test batches, 5 kilos of green beans here, 2 kilos of hand-picked tea there. I drove 6 hours to meet the first roaster in the Harz Mountains. A grumpy 60-year-old man named Klaus who chain-smoked and spoke in a thick dialect. He laughed at me when I told him my idea, but after tasting the coffee he quietly said, "If you really write the story of my beans the way I tell it, it'll give you the best price I've ever offered anyone." I took photos of him standing next to his old Probet roaster. I recorded a voice memo of him talking about how his father started the business after the war, with nothing but a bicycle and 2 burlap sacks. I wrote the very first story on my laptop at 4 a.m., tears in my eyes because it felt so real. I learned how to import without getting destroyed by customs duties. I learned about temperature-controlled shipping. I learned that most fair trade labels are marketing nonsense, and that the real difference is made by personal relationships and long-term contracts. I taught myself basic graphic design Canva first, then pirated Adobe Illustrator because I couldn't afford the subscription yet. I built a simple website on Tilda, ugly but functional. I shot product photos with my old Canon 60D and a cheap light tent I bought on eBay Kleinanzeigen. I wrote 63 different versions of the About Us page before I was satisfied. By the time I had 3 finished prototype boxes ready to show people, I had personally invested 14,300, basically every euro I had managed to save since I started working at 19. I had 37 initial suppliers who trusted me mostly because I kept calling, writing, and showing up in person. I had a waiting list of 214 people who had signed up after seeing my early Instagram stories. And I had an LLC registered at the local Amtsgericht for the symbolic sum of 1,000. I was proud. More than proud, I was quietly, stupidly convinced that I had created something that could actually matter. And that's exactly when I made the biggest, most naive mistake of my entire life. I decided to show everything to my older brother Daniel. Daniel was 29 then. He had always been the family's golden child, straight as without trying, captain of the football team, the one who could talk his way out of and into anything. He worked in logistics for one of the biggest freight forwarding companies in Germany, good salary, company car, black Audi A4, always spotless, nice apartment in a trendy part of Berlin. Parents never stopped comparing me to him, usually not in my favor. We weren't enemies. We just existed in parallel universes. He was the successful one. I was the quiet, dreamy one who still lived in a cheap rental and dreamed about things instead of doing them. But I thought, maybe this time hell see me differently. Maybe hell be proud. Maybe for once hell treat me like an equal. So I invited him over on a Saturday afternoon. I cleaned the apartment for 3 hours. I bought good coffee beans, the ones I wanted to feature in the first real box. I laid everything out on my tiny kitchen table like it was a museum exhibit. The 3 finished boxes, my cost spreadsheets printed on cheap paper, supplier contracts, the brand guidelines folder, even the mood board I had taped to the wall with yellow sticky notes. He arrived exactly on time, wearing a crisp white shirt and expensive sneakers. He looked around my apartment the way people look at something they pity but don't want to show it. Then he sat down. He listened. Really listened. He asked sharp, smart questions about margins, customer acquisition cost, churn rate, shipping times, return policies. Questions I had answers for because I had been obsessing over them for 2 years. At the end he leaned back, smiled that easy, winning smile he always had, slapped me on the shoulder and said the words I had been secretly waiting to hear from someone. Anyone in my family. Little brother, this is actually really fucking good. Like, really good. You've got something special here. Seriously. Then he paused, looked me straight in the eyes and added, let me help you take it to the next level. I know people in logistics. I can get us insanely good shipping rates. I can throw in some money, maybe 40, 50,000 to start properly. Warehousing, ads, team will handle all the operational side. You keep doing what you do best, the stories, the feeling, the soul. What do you say? 50/50ths. Brothers building something big together. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he could hear it. I said yes. Of course I said yes. We wrote a very simple agreement on one A4 page right there at my kitchen table. No lawyers, no notary, just 2 signatures and a handshake. I would be responsible for product curation, supplier relations, storytelling, brand voice. He would take care of operations, warehousing, paid advertising, scaling. I went to bed that night feeling like my life had finally started. 6 months later we had 1,400 paying subscribers. 9 months minus 4,200. Month-over-month growth was 4,565%. We were featured into big food blogs, got invited to a morning TV segment, even had a small article in the Frankfurter Allgemein's lifestyle section. Daniel rented a 400 meters warehouse in Halle, hired 2 full-time people and 1 freelancer for ads. Everything was moving at lightning speed. And then came the morning that changed everything. I opened my laptop, tried to log into the Shopify admin panel and got the red error message. Invalid login. Password changed. All access rights transferred to a new email address I had never seen before. I called him immediately. Hands shaking. He answered on the second ring. Voice calm. Almost bored. Hey, yeah, about that. I had to make some structural changes. Tax optimization. Investor readiness. Don't worry. It's all under control. What structural changes? I registered a new company. Roots and Roast GmbH. The old LLC was too messy for what's coming next. Better equity structure, cleaner books, easier for due diligence. My mouth went dry. And my 50%. Long silence on the line. Then, very quietly, very matter-of-factly. Look, you're incredible at the creative part. The stories, the authenticity, the human touch, that's your gift. But scaling a company to 8 figures, dealing with institutional investors, international contracts, compliance, that's not really your thing. I talked to lawyers. The brand name, the domain, the customer database. None of it was properly trademarked or assigned to the old entity. So legally it all belongs to the new structure now. I couldn't breathe. You stole my company. I didn't steal. I professionalized it. You would have killed it within a year or 2 with your romantic small batch approach. Now we can raise real money. Maybe exit in 3 to 4 years for 8, maybe 9 figures. You should be grateful. I remember exactly what I said next, voice breaking. You're my brother. And he answered, without the slightest hesitation. I know. That's why I'm offering you a job. Creative director. 4,800 net per month plus performance bonus. You'll be fine. You'll still be part of it. I hung up. That same evening I drove the 2 hours to our parents' house outside Dresden. I was shaking the whole way. I still believed, stupidly, desperately, that family would protect family. Dad listened to my story for maybe 7 minutes. Sitting at the same old oak kitchen table where we had eaten Sunday roast for 25 years, where Daniel and I used to fight over the last piece of apple strudel, where Mom would scold us for talking with our mouths full. His face stayed calm, almost detached, like I was telling him about a minor car accident instead of the complete theft of everything I had built with my own hands over 2 exhausting years. When I finally stopped talking, voice hoarse, hands still shaking, he took a slow, deliberate sip of his coffee, set the cup down with that careful precision he always had, and spoke in the quiet, measured tone he reserved for important family discussions. Son Daniel always had the better head for business. You know that. Has been climbing the ladder since he was 20. Good grades, good job, good connections. You've always been the dreamer. Ideas are cheap, a dime a dozen. Execution is everything. If he can turn your little project into something real, something that employs people, pays taxes, makes a real profit, maybe you should be grateful instead of fighting him. Not everyone gets handed an opportunity like that on a silver platter. Sometimes you have to recognize when someone else can do more with what you started. I stared at him, feeling the blood slowly drain from my face and pool somewhere cold in my stomach. Dad, it was my idea. My money, every cent I had saved. My 2 years of nights and weekends. He just walked in and took it. All of it. Mom, who had been standing by the sink pretending to wash dishes she had already washed twice, finally turned around. Her eyes were red, swollen, the way they got when she watched sad movies late at night. She didn't say anything at first, just wiped her hands over and over on the faded floral apron she'd worn since I was 10, the one with the tiny embroidered cherries that were almost completely worn away. Then, in a small, trembling voice that cracked on every second word, "Please don't destroy your relationship with your brother over money. Family is more important than any business. You two have been through everything together, the divorce, the moves, the hard years after your father lost his job. Don't throw that away because of pride. Daniel will take care of you. He always has. Has your big brother." I looked from one to the other, searching for something, anger on my behalf, shock, even just basic disbelief. But there was nothing. They weren't furious at Daniel. They weren't horrified. They were disappointed in me, for making a scene, for not being the bigger person, for not accepting that the golden child had once again taken the spotlight. And that was just how things worked. I stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly across the old terracotta tiles, the sound echoing in the suddenly too quiet kitchen. I didn't come here for business advice. I came because I thought, stupidly, apparently, that you'd have my back. Just once. Dad sighed again, heavier this time. The sigh of a man who had already decided the conversation was over. We do have your back. That's exactly why we're telling you to let it go. Daniel will make it big. You'll still be part of it. Maybe in a different role, but part of it. Don't ruin your life fighting a battle you can't win. I left without saying goodbye. I didn't slam the door. I closed it with a soft, deliberate click that somehow felt louder than any slam ever could. That night I cried for the first time since I was 12 years old. And Daniel had broken my favorite model airplane by accident. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just silent, ugly tears streaming down my face while I drove back to Leipzig on the empty autobahn. I kept the radio off. The only sound was the low hum of the engine, the wet hiss of tires on rain-slick asphalt, and my own ragged breathing. I had to pull over twice because my vision blurred so badly I couldn't see the road. The next 18 months were a slow, grinding collapse. I went back to the agency like a ghost. Same desk in the open plan office. Same campaigns for car insurance, teeth whitening strips, suspiciously cheap online furniture that always arrived with missing screws, and angry customer reviews. I smiled when clients praised authentic storytelling in their ads, while knowing the real, raw version of it had been ripped out of my hands and polished into something shiny and soulless. Meanwhile, Roots and Roast exploded in ways I could never have imagined, and never wanted to watch. They raised $1.4 million in a seed round from one of the most respected food tech funds in Berlin, the same fund that had backed several other purpose-driven brands that later got acquired for stupid money. The announcement was everywhere. Gernderschein ran a glowing profile. Deutsche startups called it the next big thing in conscious consumption. Handelsblatt did a short lifestyle piece with photos of Daniel in a perfectly tailored blazer, standing next to stacked boxes in the new warehouse. Daniel's face started appearing on podcasts. The visionary behind Europe's fastest-growing storytelling subscription brand. He talked smoothly about human connection, radical transparency, building something meaningful in a world full of faceless corporations. Every time I accidentally heard his voice, on the radio, in a colleague's car, in a YouTube recommendation I couldn't avoid, I felt physically sick, like someone had punched me in the solar plexus. They expanded to Austria and Switzerland within the first year after the raise. Then Benelux. They opened a flagship pop-up store in Mitte, Berlin, exposed brick walls, hanging plants, long wooden tables, baristas wearing linen aprons pouring pour-overs while reciting the story of each bean, like actors reading from cue cards. They hired a full creative team, young, enthusiastic people who had never met the farmers, never hiked up muddy mountain paths at dawn, never smelled the wet burlap sacks in the early morning mist. But they wrote beautiful copy. Very beautiful, very empty, very professional. Subscribers grew to 28,000, then 55,000, then 120,000 across 5 countries. They added new product lines, herbal infusions, single origin chocolate, even a limited edition ceramic mug collection. Revenue crossed 8 million annually, then 15 million. Whispers in the scene said they were preparing for Series B. Valuation estimates floated around 2,835 million. I watched it all from the outside, like a man standing on the other side of a thick glass wall. I never unfollowed Daniel's personal Instagram. I never stopped reading every press release. Every new market entry felt like someone slowly turning a knife already lodged in my chest. I lost weight, a lot of it, from 82 kilograms down to 69. My clothes hung on me like on a scarecrow. My cheekbones became sharp enough to cut paper. I started taking sertraline 50 milligrams at first, then 100 after the nightmares got worse. It dulled the sharpest edges of the rage and grief, but it also dulled everything else. Colors faded. Food tasted like cardboard. Music lost its pull. Sex felt mechanical and distant. I stopped meeting friends, because every conversation eventually circled back to "So how's the business going?" And I didn't have the energy to lie, or the stomach to tell the truth. My apartment became a museum of failure and stubborn memory. The 3 original prototype boxes still sat on the shelf above my desk, gathering dust. The cardboard edges starting to yellow. The mood board was still taped to the wall, the sticky notes curling at the corners. The colors faded from 2 years of sunlight. I never took any of it down. It was the only physical proof left that it had once been mine, really mine. But anger, when it simmers long enough without boiling over into something stupid and self-destructive, does something strange. It cools, it hardens, it becomes something patient, precise, almost surgical. Around month 19, I started collecting again. Not emotionally, practically, methodically. I dug out every single piece of digital and physical evidence I still possessed. All original email threads with suppliers, many of them still addressed directly to my personal email, not the company one. Daniel later created timestamped Google Drive folders with early photos, drafts, mood boards, creation dates clearly showing my name from to full years before Daniel ever got involved. The original brand book PDF with metadata intact, author, me, first save date. Almost 26 months earlier, voice memos on my old phone, WhatsApp chats, even archived Instagram DMs where suppliers congratulated me personally on the first test boxes. The very first handwritten notes I had scanned and sent to early testers, timestamps, my handwriting, my mistakes. I also quietly reached out to a handful of the original 37 artisans. Not many, just the ones Daniel had quietly phased out when he switched to cheaper, larger-scale producers who could deliver bigger volumes at half the price. They were angry, very angry. Big companies stopped paying on time, demanded insane volume discounts that killed their margins, ignored their personal stories, and replaced heartfelt write-ups with generic, SEO-optimized paragraphs. I listened. I didn't promise anything, not yet. I just stayed in touch. Coffee every few months when I was in the area. A Christmas card with a personal note. A small personal order once in a while, paid full price, no discounts. I also found and saved contact with 43 of the very first subscribers, the ones who had written me actual thank you letters in the early days, back when I still answered every single comment and DM myself. Many of them remembered the guy who started it all. A surprising number were still subscribed to the new company, but they weren't happy anymore. They felt the soul had disappeared. Boxes arrived late. Stories felt copied from somewhere else. The human touch had become just another marketing bullet point on a slide deck. I saved every conversation, screenshots, emails, voice notes. I built a folder, then another, then an encrypted external hard drive. I didn't know yet what I would do with it all. I just knew I wasn't ready to let Daniel's polished corporate version be the only story that survived. Around the 2.5-year mark, the rumors started circulating in the startup scene. Roots and Roast was preparing for Series B. Valuation whispers, 2,835 million. They were talking to big American VCS, names like Sequoia, A16Z Scouts, even some food giants sniffing around for acquisition. That was the moment I felt it, the first real spark of something like hope. Not hot, blind rage anymore. Cold, patient certainty. They had built an empire on my foundation. But empires built on stolen land always have weak foundations. And I still had the original deeds hidden, time-stamped, and waiting. By the time the third anniversary of the theft rolled around, I had stopped being angry in the hot, explosive way that makes you scream in your car at 3 a.m. or punch walls until your knuckles bleed. That kind of anger is loud but short-lived. The rage had burned itself down to a steady, blue-white flame, cold enough to keep me thinking clearly, hot enough to keep me moving forward every single day without stopping. I had built a new routine, almost like a second life running parallel to the visible one. 9 to 6, often 7 at the agency, writing copy for brands that didn't matter to me anymore. Gym 3 evenings a week in a cheap 24/7 place near the train station, not to look good, but to keep my body from completely falling apart under the weight of stress and sertraline. Then evenings, weekends, and every stolen hour. Research, documentation, quiet networking. I kept a second phone, a cheap Android burner bought with cash in a small electronics shop in the east of Leipzig, for all old project contacts. No one from Daniel's world ever knew it existed. I never used it for anything else. The first real step was the weakest link, the artisans. Daniel had replaced most of the original 37 partners with big industrial suppliers. Faster turnaround, lower prices, more consistent volumes, easier to scale. But the early ones, the small family farms clinging to steep hillsides, the women's cooperatives in remote valleys, the one-man roasteries that still roasted in tiny batches, they remembered the promises I had made face to face. They remembered the long dinners where I listened for hours without interrupting, the handshakes where I looked them in the eye and said, "Your story will always be told exactly as you tell it, no editing, no shortening, no corporate polish." So I reached out again, one by one, never asking for anything big at first, just, "How are things going with the new company? Still happy with the payments? Are they still telling your story the way you want it told?" The answers came back like a slow, steady rain, consistent, heavy, and brutally honest. The coffee farmer in Antioquia, Colombia, the one who had taught me how to properly cup coffee at his kitchen table, with his wife serving fresh arepas, told me they hadn't been paid on time in 8 of the last 12 months. The small roaster in the Hers Mountains, Klaus, the grumpy 68-year-old who had given me my first real lesson in roast profiles, said the new team demanded he remove all personal photos from his website for brand consistency. They even sent him a style guide PDF telling him his old wooden sign was too rustic and needed replacing with something modern. IT Collective in Darjeeling wrote me a long, heartfelt email saying the marketing team had rewritten their grandmother's story so heavily that she didn't recognize herself anymore. She said it feels like they stole her face and put someone else's name on it. She cried when she saw the new box description. I saved every single message, every WhatsApp voice note, some in broken English, some translated by family members, every email chain with timestamps and attachments. I started a private Notion database. Supplier name, original contract date with me, last payment received from the new company, current status, full screenshots plus translations. Then came the subscribers. I never spammed anyone. That would have backfired instantly. I just waited patiently. Whenever someone left a nostalgic comment on one of the old Instagram posts I still followed, from a ghost account with no profile picture, I sent a short, private message. "Hey, remember the early boxes with the real handwritten notes? Just checking in. How's the experience now compared to back then?" Hundreds never answered. Some blocked me, but dozens, then hundreds, did reply. And the stories were almost identical, like echoes of the same disappointment. The boxes used to feel personal, like a letter from a friend. Now they feel like marketing. I miss the real handwritten notes, the ones that looked like they were actually written by hand. The stories don't feel true anymore. They sound like they were written by someone who's never been to the farm. And thinking of canceling, it just doesn't feel the same. I always asked permission first. "May I save your words anonymously for my records?" Most said yes. Some even sent me photos of their old boxes next to the new ones. The difference was painfully obvious. I built another database. Subscriber ID, anonymized join date, original box feedback screenshots if they had them, current sentiment, full message history. By month 36 I had 28 artisans willing to go public if needed, some even eager, 67 early subscribers with detailed complaints, proof they had been with the brand from the very first boxes. and saved emails, photos, every original document I still possessed, time-stamped, watermarked, and backed up in 3 different encrypted locations, a growing folder of Daniel's public statements, interviews, LinkedIn posts, podcast clips, where he repeatedly claimed I built this from scratch with my team, or this vision was born in my head years ago. I also did something else, the riskiest single move I made during those years. I registered a new trademark, Roots and Roast Original Stories, very close to the original name, but with 2 deliberate, legally meaningful words added. I filed it personally in my name, not through any company. Cost me $1,200 in fees and 3 months of nervous waiting, but it went through without opposition. Daniel's lawyers were too busy preparing the Series B deck and investor roadshows to notice a small defensive filing in the UPO database. Then I started building the shadow brand in complete secrecy. New website, almost identical visual language at first glance, but softer colors, warmer fonts, more human photos, the originals I still had. New Instagram account, started from 0 followers, but the bio was brutally clear and honest. We are the original team that started Roots and Roast, the one who really cares about the people behind every bean and leaf. Back and better. Real stories, real people, no corporate polish. I didn't launch publicly yet, I just seeded the ground. Private stories and DMS to the 67 loyal early subscribers. Quiet, careful messages to the artisans. We're coming back. Would you come with us if we can protect your stories again? Many said yes immediately. Others said, if you can really give us back control over our own words, yes, without hesitation. I waited. Series B was announced in month 41. 12 million at 32 million pre-money valuation. Big American fund led the round, the kind that makes headlines. Daniel did a full victory lap. TechCrunch interview, Forbes 30 under 30 shortlist. Keynote at a big food and beverage conference in Berlin where he talked about scaling purpose. To a room full of investors. That was my signal. The empire was at its peak. I dropped the video. 9 minutes and 17 seconds. Me, alone in a simple room with good natural light from one window. No fancy editing. No dramatic music. Just me talking straight to camera, calm, clear, and completely unfiltered. I told the whole story from the beginning, every single detail I had documented. Showed the original prototype boxes side by side with timestamps. Old emails. Supplier voice notes with permission. My original brand book PDF with metadata proving creation dates. Then the decisive moment. The password reset screenshot from that morning. The cold phone call recording I had saved audio only, my voice shaking. The 1-page agreement we signed on my kitchen table, the paper creased, the ink slightly faded, but the signatures crystal clear. I ended with the line that had lived in my head for years, the one I had practiced in front of the mirror at 2 a.m. more times than I can count. We didn't sell the soul of the project, we just lost control for a while. Now we're back. I posted it on the new Instagram, embedded it on the new website, and sent the link privately to every single person I had in my database. No mass mailing, no spam, just personal messages. Within 48 hours to 1.2 million views. Within 72 hours to 0.8 million. The comments section exploded like a dam breaking. Old subscribers. I knew something felt off for years. Artisans. Public posts tagging the video, saying this is the man who first believed in us and told our story right. Influencers who had promoted Daniel's version. Some deleted old posts in panic, some made apology stories. Some quietly switched sides and reposted with captions like the real origin story matters. Daniel's company started bleeding subscribers overnight. Churn jumped from 4% to 11% in the first week, then 19%, then 28% in the second month. Investors panicked. The lead VC called an emergency board meeting. Daniel tried damage control. A long LinkedIn post claiming misunderstandings, former employee with an axe to grind. Legal action incoming, but the evidence was everywhere. Time-stamped, undeniable, public, and worst of all for him, it came from the people he had dismissed as small-scale and not professional enough. The Series B round got paused, then downsized, then quietly killed, and that's when I received the first real call from Daniel's lawyer. The call came on a Tuesday morning in early November, exactly 43 months after the password reset that had quietly ended my first life and started this long, patient war. Private number. I almost let it go to voicemail. I had stopped answering unknown calls months earlier. Tired of journalists, trolls, and the occasional well-meaning subscriber asking for updates. But something, maybe instinct, Maybe exhaustion made me swipe right. A woman's voice, calm, professional, slightly accented in the way Berlin lawyers often are when they speak English on the phone. Mr. My last name. This is Dr. Lena Vogel from Kansley Vogel and Partner in Berlin. I represent Roots and Roast GmbH and its managing director, Daniel last name. Do you have a few minutes to speak? I sat down slowly on the edge of my bed, the cheap mattress creaking under me. The burner phone felt suddenly very heavy in my hand, like it was carrying the weight of the last 3.5 years. I'm listening, I said, voice steady. She didn't waste time on small talk or fake politeness. My client has become aware of your recent publication. The video has caused considerable and demonstrable damage to the company's reputation, subscriber base, investor relations, and ongoing fundraising efforts. We are prepared to pursue all available legal remedies, including but not limited to claims for defamation, unfair competition under the UG, trademark infringement, and intentional tortious interference with contractual relations. I let the silence stretch, long enough that she cleared her throat. Then I said, very quietly, send me the cease and desist letter. I'll forward it to my lawyer. There was a tiny pause, the first real crack in her polished, rehearsed tone. You have counsel already. I do now. I hung up without waiting for her response. That afternoon I called the only person I trusted with something this big. Marcus, an old university friend who had become a boutique IP and startup lawyer in Munich. We hadn't spoken much in the last year's life distance. Different circles, but when I explained the full situation in 35 minutes over Zoom, sharing my screen with the hard drive folders open, he didn't laugh. Didn't tell me I was delusional, didn't say let it go. Instead he leaned forward, eyes sharp behind his glasses, and said, you've got more than enough to make this very, very uncomfortable for them. The timestamps alone are devastating. Moral rights to the original concept, the name origin story, the key visual identity. German courts take moral authorship seriously under Urheberrecht. The video. It's not defamation if every single fact is true, documented, and in the public interest. And the old contract. One page with no IP assignment, no non-compete, no NDA. It's basically worthless. We agreed on a flat fee for the initial phase plus a success bonus tied to the final settlement. I sent him the entire encrypted hard drive that same evening via secure transfer. 2 weeks later, the first formal letter went out from Marcus' office, not defensive, but offensive. We claimed prior use and moral authorship of the brand concept, and storytelling format misappropriation of trade secrets, my original supplier database, detailed cost models, story templates, and artisan relationships, unfair competition through false claims of origin in marketing materials, investor decks, and public statements, damages to my personal reputation and economic lost opportunity. My original 14,300 investment compounded at reasonable interest, moral prejudice we demanded, immediate cessation of use of the Roots and Roast name in its current form, without proper attribution transfer of 100% of the GmbH shares back to me, at nominal value to 0.8 million in damages calculated conservatively, with room for negotiation. A public apology statement drafted by S. Daniels' side panicked fast. They tried to countersue first, defamation, breach of the Brotherhood Agreement, tortious interference with business relations, but the case was weak from the start. The one-page kitchen table contract had no non-compete clause, no IP assignment, no non-disclosure, no penalty provisions. It was basically a napkin agreement between brothers. And courts don't treat those as ironclad when one side claims theft. Meanwhile, the video kept spreading organically. German Reddit threads exploded. R startups. And Tournament were full of people digging up old interviews and comparing them side by side with my evidence. Artisans started posting publicly photos of old boxes next to new ones, side-by-side story comparisons showing how much had been sanitized. Subscribers organized a mass churn day on social media, thousands canceled in 24 hours, posting screenshots with captions like "going back to the real thing" or supporting the original founder. Investor pressure mounted quickly. The lead VC from the failed Series B fund threatened to pull out completely if the IP dispute wasn't resolved within 60 days. Other backers started asking uncomfortable questions in board calls. Daniel had no good options left. In the end, after 3 mediation sessions, all virtual, all tense, with lawyers on mute half the time, he chose the path of least destruction. Settlement terms, signed in a sterile conference room in Frankfurt on a cold January afternoon. I bought back 92% of Roots and Roast GmbH for 4.8 million. He kept 8% as a silent minority stake, with no voting rights, no board seat, and a strict 5-year non-compete, non-disparagement clause, full transfer of all trademarks, domains, customer databases, social media accounts, and intellectual property rights. A public apology statement drafted by me, posted on the company blog, Daniel's LinkedIn, and sent to all active subscribers. 750K in additional damages paid to me personally for moral prejudice and lost opportunity. All original artisans got first refusal rights on new contracts, plus a one-time goodwill payment from the company. I didn't gloat in the room. I didn't call him. I didn't send a smug message or a victory photo. I just signed, shook hands with the mediators, and left. Today, almost 5 years after that morning password reset, Roots and Roast Original Stories has 187,000 active subscribers across 9 countries. Annual revenue, 21 million and growing steadily at 3,540% YoY. We went back to the small producers Daniel had abandoned, the ones who had trusted me first. We opened our own small roastery in Lisbon with Klaus as consulting master roaster. He still chain smokes, still grumbles, but now he smiles when he sees me. We give 8% of net profits directly to the farming communities and cooperatives. No middlemen, no PR stunts, just transparent bank transfers and annual visits where I still sit at kitchen tables and listen. The boxes still come with a real handwritten note. My handwriting, sometimes shaky when I'm tired, but always real. Sometimes I still write them myself when I need to remember why I fought so long and so quietly. Daniel now works as an independent business development consultant for medium-sized companies, logistics, e-commerce, food tech. From what I hear through mutual acquaintances, he earns decent money, travels a lot, keeps a low profile. He never reached out personally after the settlement. I never reached out either. Last Christmas, our mother called me crying on speakerphone while Dad sat silently in the background. She said Daniel was very sorry and misses his little brother terribly. She asked, for the 3rd time in 2 years, if I could finally forgive him. Said the family is broken without us talking, that holidays aren't the same, that she can't sleep thinking about her boys hating each other. I listened to her for a long time, the same way I used to listen to her bedtime stories when I was small, when she would read about brave knights and lost treasures. Then I said, quietly but clearly, Mom, he didn't steal money. He stole my dream, the thing I loved most in the world, the thing I built alone for 2 years before he ever touched it. He took it, polished it, sold it as his own, and called me ungrateful when I fought back. And dreams don't forgive so easily. Maybe someday, but not today. I hung up gently. Sometimes I still drive past the old warehouse in Halle, where we stacked the very first boxes by hand, laughing, arguing about label placement, dreaming big. I park across the street, turn off the engine, sit in silence for a few minutes watching the loading dock, now used by some unrelated logistics company, and every time I think the same thing. I didn't just get my company back. I got back the right to decide who gets to tell the stories, the real ones, the hard ones, the human ones, and that, it turns out, is worth much more than any million.